fellow expat Denis Cadagon as we investigate the question that everyone's asking. When did Eamon Dunphy start supporting Liverpool? Dennis, we've been out of Ireland for a while. The country has seen a lot of changes. We now vote in favour of gay marriage. A lot of people are coming out. Eamon Dunphy came out in a different way. He came out as a Liverpool supporter. I think around 2015 maybe was the first mention of this. Few could have seen it coming. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was around the time of his podcast. I guess The Stand has been on air about 2016. Very similar
Yeah.
time frame as far as I remember. So it could have been a kind of, here's an extra boost to get more listeners to the show. That's what I thought at the time. I thought, and you know how Dunphy is in the past with fads, we'll say, players that he liked for a
Yeah.
while, managers that he liked for a while. I thought, okay, he's a Liverpool fan this month. I think that's more or less what it was in my mind at the time. I was like, this isn't going to last. And now here we are in
Yeah.
2022, and he's still, well, let's say he's still keeping it up. But I will say from this era, because as we're going to go into a bit more detail, we can go back further and see that there is no evidence. But yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, well, when he first mentioned it, as I mentioned earlier, I thought he was actually saying it as a stone cold deadpan joke. He kind of just, I can't remember the exact words, but he suddenly mentions, well, as a Liverpool supporter, and I remember doing a kind of double take. Dunphy and I think he was with Brady and Giles, and they didn't respond either, which could be evidence of the jury or the prosecution, or they could have been as dumbfounded as us previously that they didn't they didn't know what to say either. Because if you take the other members of the panel, John has always been a Leeds man. Liam has been an unbiased Arsenal supporter. I say that tongue in cheek. we you jumped the fence,
Yeah.
baby. And if anybody, I feel, had to pick Eamon's team, you would have said either Millwall, although he didn't have much chance to talk about them because they haven't been in the Premiership since we started watching. Anyway, I'm pretty sure they weren't even actually in the Premiership. But we would have said Manchester United, wouldn't we?
Yeah. I mean, you look back at the books that he's written as well. I mean, there was a time in the 90s, and let's face it, if you're any kind of like person our age growing up in Ireland in the 90s watching the panel, you would have pretty much remembered everything they had to say from, let's say, the time that he was an absolute worshipper of Roy Keane. And
Yeah.
like obviously there's so many famous clips that everyone's watched to death about like his defensive Kino and just even like because of that, because of worshipping Roy Keane, he would have been by proxy a bit of a United supporter. You would have said, like in all fairness, and the fact that he wrote the first book, and then even before that, going back into United's past, he wrote a book about Matt Busby, and we know
Yeah.
that he was the start of his career before he went on to like Millwall, York, and everything else. Like you said, is maybe still his most high profile as a player, like in terms of alongside Millwall, his time at like the academy with United. So all his early football memories would have been from that time when John Giles was at the club for a bit as well before Leeds. So, you would surely say from like nostalgia alone, he would have liked to see the club prosper, do better. And he obviously had that connection to Matt Busby. He was able to interview him for the book.
Yeah.
So then you take it onto the 90s and like he's doing the same thing with Roy Keane, There's still a connection there, obviously, that he can kind of say, yeah, this is how it was in my time, this is how it is in Kino's time. And he never said it explicitly, but that's what you would expect. So that kind of takes us into the millennium, I guess.
Well, you, I believe, have hold on a second, baby. Hold your horses. uh, didn't know this to be a bad Dunphy impression podcast, but you've read Eamon's autobiography, right?
Yeah.
So just starting with that, but before we even get into his first book, what was the first one? The one that
So
he
like,
made him famous.
I guess only a game with
Yeah,
the actual
yeah,
player biography. That's about his time at Millwall. So that's, really well written football journal about his time as a player. And, it takes you into like one season. I think it was one season more or less, and like a couple of months into the year, how it is
yeah,
training, how it is for the new players, stuff like that. So it's like really because he is a good writer and he's well written kind of account of his time there, and it's a good read. And even
Uh,
this is preparation. This is only a game, right? And
yeah.
this is a strange kind of glory, which is about Matt Busby. So yes, they have been read as battered as they are, and yeah. And I've looked up in the index, as they say, to see any mentions of Liverpool. It's just in passing from a competitive point of view. So that's Article 1, but that's, as you
Yeah.
said, that's like 2 books.
So, as far as we know, there's never been any mention of him supporting Liverpool pre 2015. There's his autobiography. Fair enough. His first book is about being a player in Millwall for a season. You wouldn't expect it there, although maybe there might be a reference. I don't know. There's none. In his autobiography, it's charting his time as a kid all the way up to a certain point. I believe there's a second part coming. We were promised at some point, and maybe he'll allude to his first love of Liverpool after this takedown
Yeah, yeah. So
as a desperate offense.
that's like you said, after those books, after Busby, Only a Game, you had that Rocky Road that you're talking about after the Kino book as well. But it only goes up to 1990. So, charts his time in Dublin, growing up, going to Manchester, living in England for, I can't remember how much time exactly he spent in England. It was like, between 15 to 20 years, maybe something like that, between all of the United time, Millwall, York, he played for us. So it does go into all that detail, and then it starts his kind of rise in the 80s as a pundit again. And it ends after Italian 90 when he's pretty much chased down the street from some angry Ireland fans because of
Yeah,
being the only person in the country who dared to criticize Big Jack. But that's another story anyway. That's like, it kind of ends on that cliffhanger. So the
yeah,
next one that would be promised would be, like you said, from 1990 up to the midday, basically 30 odd years. So we wait with bated breath for that one. Maybe it will come out, as you said, but
yeah.
there's still
So
more
that's
evidence. Yeah.
so that's the evidence up till 1990 or whenever it ended. We can conclusively say that there's been no mention of him being a Liverpool supporter. Now, Dion Fanning in one interview actually asked him straight out because this has got to be questioned in some circles as to where this sudden love come from. And I believe Dion Fanning, to be fair, asked him point blank, where did this sudden love of Liverpool come from? To which Eamon, he kind of brushed it under the carpet a bit and said he's always been a fan and moved on. So we can't even give him the benefit of the doubt that he suddenly became in love with this club from 1990 onwards, when in fact that was peak Dunphy Man United fanboydom. I mean, you could say it was Roy Keane, but Roy Keane probably was the talisman that was all that was right about that club in Eamon's mind at the time. And so it suited Dunphy's image of a. To be fair, he never said he supported Man United outright, but
Yeah, that's true.
you would have had a guess. But the other thing is, I don't think Dunphy has the self control, as we've seen numerous times throughout our lives, to hold in that he didn't support them. He doesn't have that self control. That's another glaring part of his character, which we love. Um, if he did try and hold on to who he supported as a way of being the total unbiased commentator, if he wants to make that argument, we've seen time and time again he doesn't have the self control, and he does have the kind of showbiz pizzazz to explode at a certain time and say, "Well, I support Liverpool, baby." So this is the guy that famously, and we were just talking about this the other day, when he was giving his defense of Roy Keane, said when Bill famously asked uh, who wrote the article, and Bill kind of backed away, and he's like, "I'll tell you who wrote it. It was Ron Little, and he left his wife for a young one." This is the guy who
Classic.
turned up. Yeah, this is the guy who turned up drunk on TV. Now, me and you both love that era of Dunphy, actually. So we say this affectionately. He's given us so many defining moments of Irish TV and of our lives that we reference today. So I love all this stuff. This is the same Eamon Dunphy who wanted Liverpool to lose against Barcelona when Rafa Benitez was in charge. He wanted them to get beat. I remember that very clearly. And I feel like if he supported them at that moment, he would have said, I want them to lose and I'm a Liverpool supporter. So there's damning evidence, as my cat's tail swashes, and she does it. She wants
Yeah,
this silent. She
that's
wants this silenced. But yeah, so
certainly shut down.
there's damning evidence when you take all that into account.
Yeah, there's another thing that I've never heard a Liverpool supporter saying, and in the interest of clarity, you as a Liverpool supporter, me as a Man United supporter, we have a 50-50 slant here, which you think is fair.
Yeah,
He once described Steven Gerrard as a nothing player. So,
yeah.
like I said, I've never heard any Liverpool or supposed Liverpool supporter even like claim to that. Well, I think it was around the time that he literally was carrying the team as well. It was a 2004-ish era, maybe just
I mean,
before the Champions League. Yeah,
he called Ronaldo a cod as well, so he's an equal opportunist,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
sensationalist. But the fact is, he is sensational with his lack of self control.
But now it's turned to the point that you can't imagine him ever saying that about, let's say, Jordan Henderson, who's like, I know he's in a more successful team and era and everything else, but he's not half the player that Steven Gerrard is. Come on, let's face it. So, yeah, how has it changed?
How has it changed is the big question. So I think we can safely say, from our point of view, and maybe it'll be something locked in John Giles's vaults to say otherwise. But if now that we've established that there's pretty much no chance he ever supported Liverpool based on evidence, his own autobiography, his countless hours on TV, his own personality. The next question I want to ask you is, why is he saying it? Why did he suddenly change from? Well, to be fair, he's never definitively said who he supported, but why has Dunphy mania become Liverpool mania? Why do you think he suddenly has decided to almost be a fanboy, which we'll get to as well? But what's your theory? I've got my own, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah, that brings us right up to this era, doesn't it? Of where you said from 2015, 2016, when he really
Yeah,
started shouting for them. And there's definitely an air of a bandwagonism about it, unfortunately. That's part of it, I think. New team, new manager, when Klopp kind of came in about that time, like 2015, end of 2015. And since then, Liverpool have obviously been massively successful the last few years. But even before that, he seemed to jump on and everything was Liverpool this, Liverpool that. 5 episodes in, to the stand. You can listen to any episode; it starts coming very much the same. It's I'm a Liverpool fan this, I'm a Liverpool that fan that, and he says it about
yeah,
10 times an episode, so you kind of know. And like he's railed against John Giles and Liam once or twice, not as much as I'd expect, where they've kind of gone, okay, we get it, you love Liverpool, and
yeah,
it is his podcast, so they kind of have to have more self control than him to kind of not
yeah,
go fully at it. But yeah, I would say from that point of view, there's a bandwagonism thing, and his as we've commented on, his analysis lately has kind of gone out the window. I used to like the fact that he'd say anything about anyone, but now he's unwilling to criticize Liverpool. That's the problem. And he's jumping to the gun to criticize like the rival teams. He'll say Man City, can't say anything good about them. And neither of us are Man City fans, so it's not like we're biased in saying, "Oh, you don't like this." He won't say that Pep is doing well. You have little headlines like Pep has won 4 out of the last 5 leagues, and he's just getting used to the Premier League. So it's straight
yeah.
out of the Redmen United or TV United station for
He's
sure.
finally got the grips with the Premiership, was the line,
Yeah, yeah,
despite winning it 4 out of the last 5 times.
yeah. So like the fanboy thing is just completely taken off, and he can't look at them objectively anymore and just say, okay, they were bad in this game. Very rarely will he say that. He'll just kind of think, oh yeah, we beat them and we deserve to, and it really has become a bit like Red Men TV. If it wasn't for
Yeah,
John Giles and Liam trying to bring him back every now and again, then yeah, he's off the deep end in terms of his fandom.
yeah. You're off the fence, baby, as he said to Liam, who actually surprisingly has become less biased on the podcast than he ever was on TV, where he was an Arsenal man true and true. He's become the well. I'm always going to love John, but Liam has surprised me in terms of his unbiasedness for the most part. Or maybe that's in stark contrast with Eamon. Now you mentioned bandwagon jumping, and That's certainly true. One other theory I kind of have is that the Manchester United mold, my Irish accent coming out, mold, is not in thinking with how Eamon thinks about himself as the working man, the people. He's a champagne socialist at this stage, but the fact that United have become so corporate and so prawn sandwiches, as Roy Keane alluded to in the beginning of this, and the Glaciers and how they have run the club and they've treated their fans and everything like that. In contrast to how Liverpool, although they've spent a hell of a lot of money, don't get me wrong, they're still a mega power, and they have. But there's a certain ethos that Eamon at least believes is in Liverpool that seems to have attracted him a lot more. And the fact that they haven't won anything up until when Klopp's come, that I feel like Eamon sees himself in Liverpool, even though ironically he sees himself in a much more older Liverpool, really. I mean, the marketing is now, and I'm a Liverpool supporter, and the marketing is, Liverpool is the people's club. I mean, they did try and furlough everyone in COVID until people got involved, and then they did the right thing. That's not a people's club. Like that, it's an image of a people's club. But Eamon certainly has a certain image of himself, and he wouldn't dare. In fact, he's almost become hated towards United now a lot more. And when you contrast that with his love for Liverpool, so I feel a lot of it is image as much as bandwagon jumping as well. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, as they say, like if you were to choose one working class, vaguely Irish Catholic connected club in Liverpool, you'd probably choose Everton. But
Yeah,
that's another story, yeah. And when you talk about lack of success as well. But yeah, I think there's fair points that you made about United and the kind of behemoth that they are now, especially in terms of commerciality. Now that there's like the trophies are dried up so much and everything else, for sure. That it's more about like selling the shirts, and look at the Ronaldo signing last year and everything like that. Wasn't done in the interest of winning the league so much as like commercial payday. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah, he seems to believe that Liverpool still have that kind of connection to the people. They do to an extent, but the Premier League is just so big that I don't think you could level at it. Certainly not the top six clubs anymore. I mean,
yeah,
even like Arsenal and Liverpool might have their kind of section of the home base that go all the time, but it's just so global now with the preseason tours and everything like that. I think those days are gone. So whatever he's clinging on to with that, yeah, he'd have to support a team a bit lower down, I'd say. Maybe not
yeah,
even in the Premier League at this point. Who knows? But so
yeah.
there's
You
that
got to go
aspect.
go down the road and support your local. I mean, I don't know if he lives in France or Ireland anymore, but he should maybe support Shamrock Rovers with Damien Duff. But I don't care that he says that he supports Liverpool. I'm sure you ultimately don't as well. However, it's, as you mentioned earlier, how it's infected his show is the main problem.
Yep.
It's become so much as not so much the stand as it is stand up for Liverpool at any moment you can, and that's where well, this is kind of what made us do this show. We with the sheer frustration and almost like I don't feel like watching that show anymore because of it. As you mentioned, he called Steven Gerrard a Nottingham player. I believe he called Xabi Alonso a Nottingham player at one point as well. And he did get it right with Yumi Traore, where he famously
Sure.
said if Jamie Carragher tied a wheelie bin to him, he'd have better support. So he did have some great ones. But
Yeah.
it's just what he said about Gerrard and what he's saying about Jordan Henderson, which for me, when I see him on the team sheet, I'm thinking, I wish he wasn't. Now he has improved, but he's a very generic player.
Very
When he
manius,
came
yeah.
on, when he came on for England in the World Cup, or was it the Euros? I can't remember. I was like, oh, they just downgraded. And Eamon talks about him in terms of what he did. Roy Keane, a magnificent player. I think he called him world class at one stage. I think like a great captain. I think John said he spends a lot of time playing captain and clapping. I think that's the more accurate. And he
Hitting
doesn't
his
really
chest,
pass.
shouting.
He doesn't really pass forward. So you've got a cheerleader for someone like Jordan Henderson. You've got someone on the show so infatuated. I feel like it's an infatuation at this point. So infatuated by Liverpool that you will not give City any credit.
Oh yeah,
You
none.
will tear down Pep Guardiola at any opportunity. You call him, he's a weird guy, John. He's a weird guy. Like, I think a lot of managers are weird guys. You got to be a weird guy to be a top manager in a way, because you've got to be
Even want to do
dedicated.
the job.
Exactly. So, and the other major problem is that, as you mentioned briefly as well, that nobody's calling him on it. Bill, I feel like, would have at least asked him, now where did this Liverpool love come from, Eamon? You have the person running the show not really challenging the guests. Instead, a lot of the time they're challenging the host, and I think there's a weird kind of dynamic. And Eamon has always worked best, and I think this is why we've enjoyed his kind of comments in the past and he's taken down of things. He was challenging the establishment. However, on his show, he is, by nature of running the show, he is the establishment, and we just have to listen to him on his soapbox talk about Liverpool, where, again, like you said, Liam and John, they're not there to make the host look bad. They're just there to have a chat and just listen to Eamon and get their own words in when they can, I guess. And I think that's the fundamental problem with the show now.
Yeah, that's the problem for sure. I mean, like you said, you could almost pre-script it yourself if you're coming at it from a parody style Liverpool or unbelievable and everything point of view. You know, he curves the questions in so that like his question is at this angle, and John and Liam just have to answer a yes, no, more or less, agree, disagree. And it's kind of structured in that way. He's like, they're a mess, aren't they, John? And like he's trying to hook them in, and he's like, and they're not Liverpool anyway, that's for sure. Are they, Liam? And like every time it's kind of set in his way, like you said, it's completely and you know, even in jest when they do rail against him a little bit, they go, come on now, Eamon, and he'd kind of laugh and go, well, it's my podcast. You know, and like he has all that kind of hold on him as well, I guess. Like, you know, it's lifelong friends, but like you said, if they're not going to call him out on it, and Dion Fanning, yeah, to his credit, asked him the question, and as you said, he swerved away from it fast. And it seems like he's doing so many episodes of the podcast now that he doesn't have much time for other media. So someone's going to trap him.
Yeah, and we've got him by the balls. But yeah, I mean, pretty sure that's compelling evidence there. I don't know if you've got any final thoughts before I address the nation.
Yeah, just hopefully we get a rebuttal or something. If someone finds out any kind of, you know, last minute gem of evidence that throws all this out, feel free to do so. But you can see that the narrative has changed over the years big time when it comes to the fandom, and like the last 5-6 years have been insane. Yeah, since he's brought his podcast into full on LFC territory compared to the last, you know, the preceding 40 years or whatever, where there is nary a mention, as they say.
Yeah. And listen, we're happy to be proved wrong. We're just a small team of, well, you're based in Singapore. I'm based in London. We've been researching this between ourselves for the last few months, last few weeks. Yeah, day and night. We've got our best researchers on it, but there's not many of us. I want Off the Ball to get on this. I want RTE to get on this. I want people to contact the panel. Oh, no, not the panel, the stand. I want to be proven wrong. I want to see evidence of this. And if we don't get it, and if we don't get a response from him, and if we don't get any evidence, he needs to admit that he's a cod baby.
Yeah.
That's it.
Into the ether. Done. We're putting it out there. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. And we might do a follow-on podcast when we get a response. So, Dennis, let's see what happens. The jury is awaiting its verdict.
Yeah, well, he'll be on a different kind of stand.
Yeah. All right. All right, we'll leave it there. So, in the words of Bill, we'll talk to you later, yeah?
All right. Good stuff.